I'm Idiotech, and today I want to discuss the recently released Battlefront trailer, as well as some of the marketing strategies that EA have been implementing to promote the game. The trailer came out a couple of days ago. One of the things that happens early on in the trailer is there's a statement down the bottom of the frame that says, game engine footage. And at the end of the video, it says, this footage is not representative of actual gameplay. Now, I'm starting to question what the point of these trailers is, where they make trailers that show what apparently is in-engine footage, and then say, well, it's not actual gameplay or anything. Like, what's the point? Why not just hire a company to do a full CG trailer of your game? And the only thing I can really think of is that the intention here, and this is speculation obviously, but the intention here is to give people the impression that this is what the game will look like, in some sense. Maybe it's just the developer's vision for the game. They're trying to give people some impression of what the game engine is capable of doing, and therefore what the game may ultimately look like. And for a trailer like this, if you look at the comments, so many of the comments are just like, wow, this is so amazing, it's such a great trailer, I can't believe games can look like this these days, I'm buying a new PC for this game, etc, etc. And a few of the comments are, there's no way this game could possibly look this way. And they're correct, there is no way the game could possibly look this good. Now, the trailer itself is fantastic. It's a fantastic trailer, and it got me quite hyped for the game, to be honest, and I'm pretty immune to hype at this point. And I am honestly excited to see what DICE can do with the game. Now, that being said, I feel that these kinds of trailers are misleading at best, and I'll explain why. Now, to render Darth Vader, for example, standing in front of some trees with some depth of field, you know, in his helmet with some cool lighting and stuff, that requires a lot less in terms of engine performance and capability than it does to render, say, 40 players running around on Hoth with AT-ATs and people shooting blasters at everyone and X-Wings and TIE fighters flying around. You know, then to render that is extremely complex, it's very difficult, very challenging, requires a lot of optimization to get that kind of thing to run. To render Darth Vader standing in a forest, not so much. And that's the problem here, is that when you're rendering a scene, for example, in a cutscene, you can crank up the anti-aliasing, you can crank up the lighting, you can crank up the particle density, the special effects, because you have a huge budget in terms of polygons and, you know, whatnot, in order to get 60 frames per second, which is apparently what they're saying this is running at, 60 frames per second in real-time footage. But you can crank all that stuff up really high because you're not rendering anything else. There's no world behind it, you know, behind the camera, there's nothing there. You know, all there is a couple of trees and Darth Vader. It's a set, right? And there's a huge difference between that and a fully fledged real-time game experience. And so it's somewhat misleading, and that's obviously why it says game engine footage and not gameplay, and that's why at the end of the trailer it says not representative of actual gameplay. But you see, I feel it's misleading because people, for the most part, who are watching this are having a very positive reaction, and they're saying, well, this is amazing, you know, I can't believe the game looks this good. So they're clearly taking from it that the game looks this way, or at least in some part will look this good. And it won't. It just will not. It is not possible to have a game look this good with current technology. You know? And yes, they're using in-game models, and you can see that. Some of the foliage, you know, it's clear that it's a couple of polygons with some textures on it and some bump maps, etc. But they've sexed it up terrifically, and it looks great, right? I worry that people are going to see this trailer, think that's what the game looks like, and then run off and pre-order it, you know, without actually having seen any gameplay footage at all. And I think that's the intent, to be honest. I think that's the intent behind the trailer. I think that's the purpose of the trailer. And I can sort of establish this further by going to Twitter and checking out what the developers said. Now, the developers had a Q&A of sorts on Twitter, and they discussed and they answered some questions. And so someone asked the question, were those graphics shown in the trailer in-game? Now, we all know what that's asking, that question. He's asking, will the game look like this when I'm playing it? And the developer's answer to that question is yes, the trailer was filmed in-engine using our in-game models. Okay, so that's not really an answer, right? That's a very roundabout way of approaching that question. And the reason is simple. It's because no, the game will not look like that at all, especially not on a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One. It's not even remotely possible to achieve that. He doesn't say no, but he also doesn't say yes, that's what the game looks like, because he would be lying, right? And someone gets it perfectly in the comments here. He says, what's with all the politician type answers? Does the game actually look like the trailer or not? And so everyone who's reading this response from the developer knows what he's doing. They know he's dodging the question, and the person who asked the question knows what the intent behind their question was, which was, does this game look good or not, right? Does it look this good in the game or not? And the developer, you know, or the PR person, whoever this is, it's clearly someone at PR. I mean, at least that these answers have been vetted. Doesn't want to answer that. It doesn't want to give a straight answer to that question. Because if he says no, it doesn't look this good, it's going to deflate the hype and then ultimately hurt their business. They're going to sell less pre-orders, people are going to be less interested in the game, and that's bad for business, right? But if he says yes, he'll be lying. So he can't say yes either. So he has to dodge the question. And this is really a fundamental problem with like modern PR and marketing for games, because not only do we have trailers that sort of attempt, and you know, that is speculation, but they attempt to mislead people. You know, in this way, they're hoping that you see that in-game footage thing, or not in-game, sorry, game engine footage thing, and draw the conclusion that that's what the game looks like. And by the end of the trailer, you're so hyped and excited because it's a great trailer that you don't read the fine print that says this is not actual gameplay. You know, that's what they're going for here, and they're doing it to maximize pre-orders. You know, otherwise they wouldn't have announced pre-orders on the day that this trailer came out. I mean, it's clear what the business model is here. And the developer has to mitigate and avoid and dodge questions for as long as possible to maximize the amount of people who think that this is actually what the game's going to look like, so they go out and pre-order the game. But the people engaging with this guy on Twitter, they know exactly what he's doing, and they're calling him out on it. And there's another example here, and some of the other issues are things like related to space battles not being in the game, etc. And someone asked a direct question, are we going to be able to participate in space battles? That's pretty straightforward, right? That's a yes or no response that he's looking for there. And the developer's response is, you'll be able to take to the skies over our planets and dogfight with squadrons of starfighters. Well, that's not an answer to the question, right? And it's clear that the people in the comments know that that's not an answer to the question. So they're like, so no space battles then? No space battles ever? You know, some guy's freaking out saying, oh, don't worry, guys, it'll come in DLC, you know? So all that's happened here is people don't trust you. You know, they don't believe what you're saying. It's clear that you're dodging the question. You're saying, oh yeah, you'll be able to fly in X-Wings and stuff and TIE fighters. It's going to be great, guys, in the sky, not in space, you know? Companies like EA, people don't trust them as is, you know, for various reasons that take too long to go into here. We all know what they are. But this is one of the fundamental reasons, is because when asked a straight question, people don't receive a straight answer. People want to know, does the game look as good as the trailer, so that they can buy the game, you know, so they can be excited about the game. Because half of the fun of a video game is being excited about it before it comes out, you know, and anticipating how much fun it's going to be. And answering that question, honestly, would reduce that, so they don't do that. And then, are we going to have space battles? Everyone wants space battles. Battlefront had space battles, and they were great fun. Well, no, they're not, obviously. But he can't say no, because again, that would deflate the hype. And this is a fundamental problem with how PR is handled by developers, and has been for a while. If a developer's asked a question about a feature, and someone says, is that feature going to be in the game? Their response is very rarely no. You know, it's usually, not right now, it's not currently in the game, but it's something we're willing to consider, and it's not, you know, everything's on the table. And that's a sort of non-answer to the question, you know. Most of the time when a developer says that, they know full well that the feature will never be implemented into the game, and sometimes the features people are requesting are ridiculous, you know, or they don't work within the game for whatever reason. You know, and that's how they answer it, because they don't want to say no to people, because saying no to someone leads to disappointment, which leads to ultimately reduced sales. That's how they see it anyway. Now, personally, if someone came to me and said, and I was working on this game, and they said, you know, why are there no space battles? I would tell them the reason for it. I would first tell them there was no space battles, and then I would tell them why. Because if you tell someone the reason why something's happening, they may be disappointed, but they'll also be understanding. If you just say no, then they're going to get upset. And if you lie to them or dodge the question, as they're doing here, then people are just going to feel like you're lying to them, or you're messing with them, you know, or you're not willing to confirm anything. And that doesn't instill consumers with confidence, you know? If I say, look, we couldn't put space battles in the game, we really, really wanted to, but we tried to do it, and it was technically not feasible. with our current team or our assets or whatever, you know, or we just didn't have the money, or the amount of development time it would have taken to implement such a feature would have pushed us way past our expected like release date, you know. And obviously they want to release this game to tie in with the Star Wars movie coming out in December, you know. That's a factor. You know, it may just be we cannot put that feature in time for the Star Wars movie, you know, and people will say, well, release it later then. They can say, well, look, guys, I understand, but at the end of the day, it makes good business sense to release it around the same time as the movie. You know, at least people will understand, and then you can just say, look, we really want to put them in. Maybe we'll put them in Battlefront 2, although that already exists, you know, or maybe we'll do it DLC down the line. And to be honest, if it comes in DLC down the line, that's cool. That's a really cool feature to put in downloadable content. Downloadable content isn't always bad. It's just, you know, if it's shit downloadable content, then it is. But if it's something awesome, like an entire new element of a game, like space battles, then that's cool. Sure, it would be nice to have them in on release. It would be nice to have a single-player campaign. It would be nice to have a million things. But ultimately, that kind of thing just isn't feasible within reasonable budgets, you know? Sometimes you have to cut features in order to get things done. That's just how development works, you know, for a number of reasons that take way too long to go into. Ultimately here, I view the problem with this as transparency. You know, companies like EA don't have a good reputation with customers. It's a default position to most gamers to just say, oh, it's EA, I don't trust them. You know, they're going to release something that's bad, full of DLC, full of microtransactions. They're just going to nickel and dime me for every penny. And I can understand that position because, to be honest, that's what EA has been doing for many years. You know, they've recently turned over a new leaf and said that they'll try harder to, you know, work with gamers. And really, people have not restored faith in this company at all. And so when you continue practices like this, when you continue to dodge answers, when you put out trailers that are somewhat misleading, all it does is it either fools people who pre-order your game and then get ultimately disappointed when it comes out and doesn't look like a movie, or the people who have any sense about them, you know, or are more informed about these issues, realize that you're lying to them or that you're trying to dupe them and mislead them in some way, and then that just erodes trust further. Long term, this doesn't make sense, you know? And ultimately, and again, this is speculation here, but really, to me, it seems quite obvious that the point of this is to give some indication that this is what the game will look like, at least to some degree, and inspire confidence in the customer base to the degree where they go ahead and they pre-order the game. And the thing with pre-orders, and this is an entire topic for another time, but the thing with pre-orders is that if you can get people to pre-order your game before it's even released, and you can get your money back, that's a much safer business option for you than releasing a game and then hoping people like it so they tell other people to buy it, and critics like it so they tell other people to buy it, and hoping your game's successful off that. You know, if you can get people to give you the money before your game's even out, then you know, your shareholders are happy, you're happy, you've paid for the development, you know, you've made your money back. And if the game does flop, or there's server issues on release and there's negative press, etc., it won't affect your income. And so trailers like this and games like Watch Dogs, you know, who did the same thing, and you know, all the games that came out last year that were broken, like Assassin's Creed Unity and Halo Master Chief Collection, all of these games made their money before the game even came out because of pre-orders, because of hype, right? And this is just the fundamental issue here. If you overhype your products or you misrepresent your products, then ultimately, yes, you're probably going to make a lot of money in the short term. But in the long term, you're going to erode consumer trust. People are going to lose confidence in your studio. And we've seen this with EA. You know, people still buy EA games, but they don't like EA. And the more they keep doing this over and over again, the more they're going to erode consumer confidence, which ultimately could lead to another crash. And that's something I don't think we could survive this time around, because last time there was an industry crash, it happened on the consoles. And the only reason video games survived was because of the PC market. But this time, AAA games, most of them are cross-platform. So if they go away on Xbox and PlayStation, they go away on PC as well. I really do think that companies are seeing marketing and PR in a very sort of short-term sense. They're not thinking about long-term goodwill, you know, best practices. Companies like Blizzard, they have very loyal fans. And the reason for that is because when they release a game, A, it's usually good, B, it usually doesn't have microtransactions, DLC practices, all this stuff. You know, they're not trying to nickel and dime their customers, although they do, but they do it in a different way that doesn't make people feel bad. You know, and when they do release a bad game, like for example, Diablo 3, and it's one of the worst games Blizzard's released in a long time, they fixed it. You know, they went and fixed it. They came out and they said, look, this store that's making us like lots of money, I imagine, we're going to cut that out of the game because it's bad for the game. You know, that kind of business sense is what gets loyal customers. And this is what EA does not have. You know, they just put out big hype trailers, buy our next iteration of this game, and then it comes out, it doesn't work, it doesn't look as good as it's supposed to. You know, Battlefield 4 didn't work for over a year. Some people still have problems with that game. That stuff erodes consumer confidence. What you want to do is take your time, talk about your game honestly, openly, be transparent. Let the developers actually say something about their game instead of having every word that comes out of their mouth vetted by a PR guy. Sure, occasionally you might overpromise and underdeliver on a feature, but at the end of the day, if you give people a reason for why things are happening, they're going to be far more likely to understand. That's just my thoughts on the issue, you know. Ultimately, I think Battlefront will probably be quite a fun game. I think DICE is probably a good studio to handle it. You know, it would have been nice to see the original game. Ultimately, I think it could still be a very enjoyable game, even if it isn't necessarily what everyone wants or what everyone was expecting. At the end of the day, I think it will probably be a good game. I just really wish that developers, well, not so much developers, but publishers and the PR and marketing side of the industry would open up a bit more, be a bit more transparent with people, you know? People can see through this stuff. We've watched politicians do this for years and years and years. No one trusts politicians. And if you start behaving like politicians, no one's going to trust you either. And ultimately, that's bad for business. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the new Battlefront trailer, sorry. And, yeah, if you've got any comments or feedback or whatever, leave them in the comments. If you like the video, like it, share it, etc. I'm not going to bother you with that stuff. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys. Take it easy.